Happy Easter. Of course, it's a lovely Saturday out there. For those of you who have traveled out of Accra to your hometowns, to Kwewu, to Jakiti, of course, I have to mention that because that's where 3FM and all TV3 people are headed and are in right now. Of course, they're going to enjoy Easter then. You should join them. It's not too late. But of course, Rosamond is not here with us today because she's already gone out there to enjoy the Easter. But Petra is in studio with me. Sweetie.
Hi, Nana.
Hi.
Well, it's also, apart from being Easter, it's also the end of March, the end of Ghana month. And I know we've had a lot of exciting things. We've spoken so much about watch Ghana, see Ghana, know Ghana, eat Ghana, wear Ghana. And we're very excited that we've had the opportunity to celebrate Ghana. And so today's episode is going to be very exciting. And we'll take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll continue the show. Welcome back. And so we're celebrating Easter, and of course we have to have a conversation around Easter. I'm sure Easter represents so many things to so many of us, but essentially, what is Easter? And are we still celebrating Easter in the right spirit of Easter? Is the spirit of Easter still there? And what exactly does it represent for all of us? Nana, I know Easter represents so many things to different people. I mean, there's Kwewu, Kwewu, and we are singing Jakiti, Jakiti. So you tend to feel that it's all about celebration. I know Rosamond is somewhere chilling by now. Hi, Rosamond. But there's a lot of that. And of course, we always take the opportunity of a holiday to rest and meet family and have fun. But do you get the sense that we're losing touch with what Easter should really represent?
I think on the whole, it looks as if we've lost meaning. And I won't be surprised because there's so much proliferation of churches who really don't understand the Bible. And so they're teaching things of their own. But if we go back to the basics and we really decide to, appreciate Easter for what it is, which was Christ's, passage through, the whole celebration of the fact that he was going to die for us. He died with our sins. He gave us the chance to live and live life fully. He had taken away our sins. You have that fresh start. If really we decided to think about it like that, then it will be more beneficial to us because even along the year, maybe you don't get the chance to really reflect on this. But if you took that moment to think of the sacrifice that one human being had to make for you. Remember, I'm always enthused by that story because when Jesus died, he wasn't sure. It was a gift, but he wasn't sure whether we would accept it or not. And so he did it on the blind side of everybody. He did it anyway, only hoping that you would, accept and, blah, 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 and goes on. And so for me, it's very symbolic, and I think if we reflect and use that moment not only in Easter but throughout our life's journey, it will be very good on all of us as Ghanaians, and we'll see transformation as is expected. Because Petra, when you see your brother or your sister who's hurting and you can easily look away and yet call yourself a Christian, I find it very funny. I find it, the Bible even says you're a liar, because the person you see the person is suffering, you can't help, but you would rather send your tithe to church, all your big monies, you're doing all the big things so that the pastor sees that this church, this lady is doing good in church. That's not what Christ, or Christianity is all about. And that certainly wasn't why Easter came into being. So I think overall, the churches have that responsibility to remind us of what Easter truly means. Otherwise, it will fizzle out. It will become a regular celebration. Like you said, holidays for everybody, Easter. So we are going to Kwewu or we are going to Jakiti, or another place will come up which will be flying to, So it's high time we spoke about it as a nation and focused on what the real symbolism is for.
Okay. You mentioned that the churches need to teach. I think the individual Christians also need to learn for themselves. Right. Because what tends to happen is some Christians tend to put the responsibility of studying and knowing the Bible on the pastor. And so you realize that there are lots of pastor-dependent Christians instead of Christ-focused and following Christ Christians. I agree. So that's where I feel we possibly have a challenge. And so there's a lot of reliance on what someone says instead of what actually the Bible teaches. And so maybe we also need to consider, advise that people should actually open the Bible and read and study for themselves, because the Bible is the manual. The opinions and thoughts and teachings of people complements what the Bible says. And that's why we should also be able to know when someone is gone outside or astray, which is a very big issue in Ghana, I think, with the church in Ghana, because then you hear all sorts of very interesting teachings and you're like, what? Jesus didn't die for that
at all. What will Jesus do?
I mean, yeah, Jesus didn't die for that. But you also mentioned the issue of us giving and sacrificing and doing things around Easter. I think it's good. Yeah. Christianity hinges on a lot of relevant historical teachings and days that we remember. There's a huge conversation around Christmas and whether Jesus was born at Christmas or not. But I think the significance is that we use Christmas to remember his birth. But one of the foundational pillars of Christianity is the death and resurrection of Jesus. And so if we lose focus of that, because that's the whole point of being saved. Like if Jesus didn't die and resurrect, then there wouldn't be Christianity. So it's also the core, like you rightly said, that we need to reflect and ensure that we're still doing Easter for Easter.
But again, you know, I think the infiltration of this Western culture is what has shifted our focus away from celebrating Easter for us Ghanaians in the right way, on what we were born and, you know, taught from infancy, that Christmas celebration was all about Christ's, you know, death and his resurrection. And now it's become, we're looking for Easter bunnies, we're looking for things to, you know, decorate.
That's weird. Yeah. I mean, when I see
I'm like,
things about Easter bunnies
where did you learn
Ghana.
that thing from? We are Ghanaians, so now who is going to look?
There's also Halloween parties in Ghana now. So it's really, it's a big issue. We are
becoming
so
too
much
westernized. You see, and the funny thing is, they don't copy our culture.
No,
so why do you want to learn
not
from?
At all.
Of course, there's always some good to be learned, but don't take it, you know, whole
Hook, line, and sinker.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then at the end, you look silly in their eyes because these people you don't even understand where did this Easter bunny originate from before the egg.
Well, fairy tales, like we all read Ladybird books and all that.
You know, we for us is Etikele and Anansi, and that was it. So maybe the infiltration of these things, we need to draw a line between them. Let your children understand what it is, because if we lose that along the line, for the Christians, the tradition then is, you know, mixed up, and the child doesn't know which is which. And so if you even give them the chance to travel out, then that's it. They lose it completely, you know. So maybe that also has to be talked about. Of course, people make their monies from selling all these Easter bunnies and Easter eggs, so it's welcome. We can learn other cultures, but let's not really adopt it and become our
Easter bunny, like
what
does that mean?
Let me not even get down to that, Petra, because the deep thing, when I see it in shops, you know, there's a particular brand that usually makes the Easter bunny. So when I'm looking for chocolates and I see it, and I see children hovering about it and pointing at it to their parents, I just like, I just go by and I'm like,
it's the commercialization of everything.
Yeah.
So all of the celebrations and
Christmas especially.
And Christmas and Easter and Valentine's Day and everything, the huge commercialization of everything. But then that's where we also need to use the institutions. So the church must be clear. What is this celebration about? What is the relevance of Easter? Why do we celebrate Easter? What do we want to remember? And what do we want to pass on to the next generation? So that's important. And when we're thinking about the significance of Easter, we cannot remove the fact that the whole point of Jesus dying and resurrecting is the point. And so I think when we must emphasize that over and over again. And the media has a huge responsibility. I mean, and we have to use all of the tools that we have. So wherever we have an opportunity, it's good to celebrate and have fun and go to Kwewu or Jekiti or wherever you decide to go. But we mustn't forget. And unfortunately, around these seasons is where we tend to have a lot of incidents of accidents and people very interesting behavior. So we also want to encourage that people celebrate in a responsible manner.
Certainly, they should. But we don't want to leave our viewers out. And so we'd like to see what they also think about Easter, and have we lost the spirit of Easter as Ghanaians? Let's see.
Took our sins away, and he replaced us. So where we were dead, he gave us life. Where we erred, he justified us before the Lord.
It's basically about love, the love Christ shared for us, and it reminds us of the power we have as Christians. And I think as a nation, we usually forget the sort of power that we have.
I see it as a very solemn period where we have to really rethink what happened at that period. And for me, I don't really see it as a celebration. I grew up in a Presbyterian church, so for me, Easter is all about Christianity. People go to Kwewu and people go to the beach and other places, but I have not yet gotten to that stage where I see Easter to be a social event or a social activity where I just have to jubilate. Because right from childhood, it's only on Easter Mondays, and we still do it in the church. We come for picnic, and then we announce to the world that Christ is risen.
To me, it's a normal thing. Just stay home with friends and family and all that. Yeah, just stay home and think about myself. I think that's for me. That's how I spend my Easter.
For me, just the death of Jesus Christ and the love that he came to share for us. So yeah, that's the main reason why we're here. And every single year we need to appreciate him and for what he's done for us.
I mean, there's no love. There's no love. There's no love around us. There's no love in us. I mean, if you understand the love that Christ shed on the cross of Calvary, you'll be able to understand what love is and be able to exhibit it to people around you. But we have failed to do that. I mean, people are robbing in broad daylight. I mean, if you have love, you wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I just love holidays anyway, just for me, because works are really tedious. So yeah, having a 4 days holiday is really good for me.
I don't want to generalize things because some people celebrate Easter in another way. But we Christians, and in fact, even when we talk about Christians, we have different views about that. But I believe that Christians are supposed to celebrate Easter as a remembrance of the fact that the Lord Jesus Christ came to redeem us. And it's not only on Easter, but it has to be every day.
Everybody understands Easter in its own way. I don't judge. So people go to church. Some also party, as you said, and all that. But I prefer to stay home and think.
I wouldn't say we've lost it. We are trying. We are human, so we'll fall short. But then we need to be back on our feet again and then do what is right. We are humans. We can just keep praying and asking for forgiveness.
For me, and for many Christians, Easter continues to be the most important period of the year because it's the basis of the Christian faith. Easter reminds us of our responsibilities to God, and as God's children, our responsibilities to one another. It is also a time that we recommit ourselves to following his example, to love, serve, and sacrifice for one another, just as he did for every one of us.
We remember Martin Luther King for something he said. He said, "I have a dream that one day my 4 children will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." We also remember Kwame Nkrumah for many insightful things that he said. We remember so many great people because of the things they said. And today, we want to reflect on how communication affects and influences people. Because this week, and for a very few weeks past, we've had several incidents of very prominent people speaking to issues of society or speaking in public, and their words having various repercussions. Sometimes we say things we don't mean. Other times we mean things and we don't say them. And so today we'll have a few minutes to discuss how does our communication reflect on who we are and how does it influence the people around us? Nana.
Yeah, Petra, like you said, in some weeks past, we've had very unsavory comments coming out, and that raises the question of communication in general. Do we really understand what it means to be giving a platform to utter a few words or otherwise choose to be silent? Because everything that proceeds out of your mouth oftentimes is something that you have welled up in you. And so it has to be thought out carefully, because you may have a good intention, but the way and manner in which you bring it out. And when we talk about communication, it's not even only verbal, the non-verbal, your gestures, the things you may have. I mean, it could even have been a joke, but just because you didn't say it well, it becomes wrong, it becomes negative. And so I think overall, as a country, we have to start looking at it that just because you've been given a platform doesn't mean you're a good communicator. That's why there are courses in mass communication. There are courses such as public speaking, where you need to actually understand what what you want to say, how you want to say it, before you attempt to say it, because it's a skill, it's acquired. You're not all born to be great speakers. Even great speakers, I mean, people who have it in their bloodline, they learn and practice, 1,000 hours of practice. And so you can't just get up one day and think you've gotten it all and just say anything. As in Wesley Girls, when I was a junior, they would say you open your mouth and you shoot at any angle, you don't measure. No bisection, no trisection, you just release it and it's gone. You know, and it's unfortunate because, like you said, you're remembered for what you say. There have been people who said good things and they've remembered for it. You can say bad things and it goes down in the annals of history and you can't erase it. Unfortunately, once it goes with a wind. So I think it's high time as a nation we look at how we talk, how we say certain things we say. I don't want to even bring in examples, but I mean, I heard some examples, and for a moment, because I didn't hear it myself, I thought it was, you know, and it couldn't be true. I mean, how would this man of God just, you know, mount a podium and say something like that? But when I took the video and I really listened, I thought, oh no, maybe that shouldn't have happened. But even when you're a Christian, you know, you're a big man out there, people see you in a specific light, and so they're expecting more from you. So if you go about trying to detail what you've done for someone who's being honored or remembered, I think it was done behind closed doors. If you wanted people to know, then you should have written a documentary, a document, and put it out there. People know the, you know, expenses I've made. But certainly, I didn't think that was why he did what he did. And so why would you use that platform to be the one to say such a thing? And I thought it marred the whole good he had done. Whereas everyone notices that he has been very instrumental in the life of the person who passed away. So maybe it wasn't necessary.
But you know, sometimes you mentioned that there's one thing you talked about that I'd like to hinge on, the issue of the platform. We need to recognize that when we have a platform to speak to people, it's a privilege.
It is.
And we're in holding that position in trust. And so whatever we say, we must be mindful that we are influencing people. And it's very simple things as an interview on TV or on radio, an opportunity to share a few words with someone, or even posting on social media. Exactly. Because for every one of us who is on Facebook, we have maybe from 500 to 5,000 followers. And so just a comment influences someone. I mean, you could just wake up and put an emoticon that says you're crying, and all your friends will be like, oh, what's up? What's going on? What's going on? Things like that. So Facebook, social media, wherever you're communicating, we need to be mindful. And if we take a few steps back into history, when we think about what happened in Rwanda, it was from comments, like just comments, people speaking, and then you begin to incite feelings of hatred and tribalism and things like that. So I think we need to be very mindful and realize that, especially when we have the opportunity to be on a platform. So a platform essentially is you're in a position of privilege, and that we need to be mindful that whatever we say influences people, both negatively and positively. But the other thing is, sometimes when we're reporting what people say, we should be mindful of the context.
Right.
Because it's sometimes lost on us. For instance, the issue of Ebony's funeral and what Dr. Lawrence Tete said. When I watched the video, I said to myself, okay, what happened before this conversation? What was he driving at? And I tend to understand, I understood better when I listened to it. And I feel that there was some that were very funny. I mean, there was this part where he said to somebody, Onye. And I'm like, okay, I don't even think I'm allowed to say that on TV. You know, but they're very, you need to have the context, you know, and sometimes we're lost on the context. But they're clear demarcations of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. I mean, when you make comments like there's going to be a civil coup and there's going to be an uprising and people are going to revolt, especially when you're in a political position where you have following, that type of comment, of course, can be totally declared as irresponsible. But yes, we do have to, and again, I think maybe we need to go back and think about what our culture prescribes. Because we are a very, very well-groomed culture. And so in our regular culture, you would know that when people want to speak, how we speak, we're humble to a fault. So we should go back and think of, okay, so what will we regularly do? I don't subscribe to the thinking that you always have to be humble, because then sometimes our humility is borderline timidity, and so we don't speak up for anything. But the issue is, how is what you're saying going to affect the people hearing? And we can even take a cue from the Bible that says that if what you're saying is not going to edify, then shush.
Keep shut. keep shut. But anyway, we hit the streets of Accra to find out what some experts had to say concerning communication in general, whether we understand it, whether we need people to teach others how to communicate appropriately. Let's see.
We first of all have to understand that in the modern age, as we're here, with increasing, level of technology, no communication is private. So it is difficult for you to say or to think that this one is in private. You cannot, actually protect yourself from being in public. So what is meant for private conversation, tomorrow you find it in public. So we have to be mindful, whatever we are saying, that if we get out of hand or if we get into the public domain, what is the consequences? And we must be prepared for that. And I think based on that, we'll be able to think about the communication devices that we use in order that just in case it goes public, the impact or the effect wouldn't be as grave, as if you were not aware. So that is one. Now, secondly, we must also be aware that situations change. So you have gone into a program, you have a prepared speech, or you have a prepared position, thinking that, of course, the audience that you're going to speak to are of a particular caliber. So you take audience into consideration, and that's why you have this prepared speech or prepared position. However, you get there and the situation is different. You probably have one or two media people around, or you don't even know that there's media people around. You have to be aware that, you must change some part of your communication, some part of your speech. Usually we'll call it situational communication, because there was a predefined environment before you went. So you've agreed venue, you have agreed audience who are coming, etc. But you could observe that there is a difference. Immediately you must adjust yourself, And again, we can actually look at that as contextual. So you immediately consider the context within which you're going to communicate, and again, adjust yourself accordingly. So the prior situation based on which you prepared your speech may be different at the time that you're about to deliver your speech. And so you must take into consideration the differences, the environmental differences, and adjust yourself accordingly. You also are aware of values, social values, and based on which you communicate. Now, these social values are some sort of constraints that actually regulate the way we speak. And that's why sometimes you have to use, excuse me to say, that kind of mechanisms, In our local language, they say, proverbs, you use certain proverbs. You pardon, people for using certain words, or you kind of throw in some kind of mechanisms to put what you're saying in a lesser context in terms of its impact. So you have to be mindful of those social values. And where things like metaphors or euphemism are actually meant, you need to disclose it. So there must be disclosures, to say that, you're actually using a metaphor, to convey what you're saying. Now, immediately you disclose that this is a metaphor, then of course everybody understands you within that context, because you may not necessarily mean, what you're saying, but you're using it within the context of a metaphor. But if you don't disclose that this was a metaphor, this is a metaphor, then you could be misunderstood, and therefore you could get yourself in trouble. And then again, sometimes we have to use euphemisms, to reduce the impact, So sometimes you want to say that somebody is a thief, but, being blunt in that sense could have a negative effect. And social values may even not permit you, to use those words directly. So then you have to resort to euphemisms, to regulate the impact. you know. And then, of course, we also have to be, self-aware. And if I say self-aware, I always say that, look, communication, whether speech, text, or whatever, is secondary product to thinking, all right? Immediately you say something, the thought process had formed before you say it. Now, you always have the opportunity to rephrase your words, to reconstruct your thinking, all right? And even when you hadn't been able to do so, or you haven't had opportunity, because not everybody has that ability, to think and say within a split second, and as a result, get or have that control of rephrasing the thought and then, coming out. But there is a mechanism that when you get it wrong, you could write it, i.e., or that is using apologies. So once the word comes out and you realize that you misspoke, you quickly say, oh, I apologize for that. You apologize and you say, well, you didn't mean that. And then you rephrase and then use the right word. Now, society is likely to forgive you for that because you have acknowledged, your mistake, that you misspoke. There are times where people are prepared to say the worst things. So that one, you can't control it. That's exactly what they want to say. So, but where the person means good and they say it wrongly, this is the context I'm actually explaining this. Now, from what he's saying, I can understand that you always don't speak in absolutes, as a measure of effective communication. You don't speak in absolutes. You speak in a way that you have a window of escape. So even if you had finished speaking and it comes out to be the other way around, you can follow up. And that's why journalists would always follow up and say, or you have the opportunity to redress what you have previously said. So you follow up and say, oh, you didn't mean that. You wanted to say this. And that's why you have to also use the disclosures, the acknowledgements, and all those things. So in your communication, don't be emphatic. Sometimes, there are times where you have to be emphatic because they are facts. So you can actually state the fact as they are. You can be assertive. But in most times, especially when it is, like you're saying, very live, communication, and sometimes you're not particularly sure of what you're saying. Even when you're sure, sometimes you want to have yourself some windows of escape so that just in case you have to follow up, you could follow up your thoughts and say, oh, this is exactly what I meant, not the previous. Now, where you have absolutes, emphatic, and then you restate and you reaffirm your positions, that's where it becomes a problem, because then people say you had opportunity, but you emphatically said this, or you repeat it several times. Now, when you do that, then you're actually fixing yourself in a problem. Unfortunately, in Ghana, every debate has a closure. People say things and that's the final. They don't allow the discursive field, to emerge. They don't allow people to clarify their thoughts. They put a seal on it and they say that's it. I think something that we need to move away from. Let us learn how societies of civil positions or civil societies actually engage in debate. Very, very, divorce of what somebody would say, values, i.e., they don't impose, things on what people are saying. Let people clarify their thoughts. We would, come to realization that we can't do things as it were any longer. We must change. We must adapt to global practices. We must adapt to the global village. And if we really want to be part of the committee of civil societies, then we have no excuse but to change.
You heard it there from the experts concerning communication. Ultimately, Petra, for me, I think communication has a key role to play, and it's to inform or to persuade or to entertain. And so if your message that you're carrying doesn't do any of these, then I think you should calmly sit down and think through it and then rephrase it so you can inform appropriately. And that's what it comes to.
Yeah.
Of course, it's our politicians who always fail at this, and maybe they should go for some training in communication.
Yeah,
I
but
think they need it.
really what you say is a reflection of who you are inside. So what we also consume, what we're putting into our minds, especially for young people, we say to people that you read and that builds your vocabulary. As well, when you read trash, the content
garbage in, garbage
garbage
out.
in, garbage out. So we need to also be mindful of that, because that's what really reflects when we speak. And communication and language essentially is a very important tool for leadership, for life, and it's something we must master.
Yeah.
So what to say when, what to say, how to say it, when to say it, things like that.
Why?
Or why to say it, yes.
Exactly.
And really, silence is golden.
It is.
I mean, in the multitude of words, sometimes you lie or you go overboard. So it's just a very basic rule.
It is.
Yeah.
And silence is actually communicating in a way. I mean, the fact that you have nothing to say, just because everyone is talking about a topic doesn't mean you have to
say
air your view, because really maybe you don't have any contribution.
Well, you know,
make.
that's one of the things about social media these days. Like when there's an issue, everybody is an expert.
Yeah, we all just
everybody has a comment.
We just took communication, you know, lessons, so we know it.
Yeah.
You talk about medicine, everyone is there ranting and raving, and I'm like, okay, have fun. But ultimately, we need to know how to communicate properly, because at the end of it, it either mars or builds up. It tears down, you know, or builds, edifies. And so if maybe you have nothing
you know,
to say,
it's almost the situation of there's a white sheet and one black spot.
Yeah.
And people hardly remember the good things you do. They always remember the negative things. So we need to be mindful that whilst we're in the mood, whether it's a political platform or wherever we are, we need to just be mindful of what we actually let out. You can sometimes we think things, you know, like when someone crosses you in traffic, you're thinking,
really?
this person.
Yeah, but you keep
it because you don't.
You just pray it off. You know,
so.
the better part of you. Because sometimes it looks like, you know, when a mad person, I think there's a proverb in Tree that says something like that. When a mad person is chasing you, you don't just follow them, obviously, because then when you do that, you also look mad.
Sure.
And that's what it is with communication. I feel for politicians, just because you're agitated by an opposition member or he's saying something that you don't agree with, doesn't necessarily mean you have to insult or be, you know, aggressive. There's a way in which you can. I actually even admire the politicians who are calm but get a point across, because I feel you get your listeners to follow you. But when you're just shouting, everybody is like, oh, Opentokwa. But maybe that's not even it. Maybe you have substance in what you're saying. But just because you've carried yourself communicating about aggressively and it's like you're fighting the whole world, everybody just leaves you to talk, and at the end of it, okay, that's
But isn't that what our political discussions have become? Because it's really about he who shouts the loudest has the best opinion or has. So we
need to train again in communication. They should all, right now that they're on recess, they should all be, you know, tasked to go for some communication lessons, and you sign for your credit hours. Make sure Speaker of Parliament approves it, and that's that.
Wow. Okay, we'll take advice from now communication expert Dr. Nanaoma. Welcome back. On Career Woman today, we're going to celebrate a wonderful woman who is the Vice President of Liberia and who you could say is a career politician. Madame Jewel Taylor is also the ex-wife of former President Charles Taylor of Liberia. And we have an exclusive interview with her, exclusive to TV3 and Captured by Women. You don't want to miss this. Please stay tuned.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for your time and attention.
Well, it's a privilege and an honor to be here in Accra, in your beautiful city.
First of all, how different is it being a vice president from a first lady?
I think it's two separate roles. Most first ladies are wives of presidents, and there is a lot that you can do, but being vice president, you're on the spotlight a little bit more because you're actually part of the governance structure, and whatever you do and whatever you say impacts policies and decisions of the president. You must learn to be second in command and not overshadow the head of state. You must be willing to work 24 hours to accomplish his vision.
Wow. And your government has a lot of expectations, especially from the youth. How do you intend managing these expectations?
Well, we're blessed, I believe, when the young people remain engaged for over a 12-year period, waiting for the presidency of Ambassador George Manenwea, who is now President of the Republic of Liberia. They were patient for 12 years because they believed that he had the vision for transformation of their lives. However, I'm aware that as a politician, that expectation, once you win, steps up a notch. And people expect more and they want it now. Over the past few months, we've been in power now for about 2 months. We've managed to put together our cabinet. We're now sitting down as a team to work out the details of the programs that the president had espoused during the campaign. The expectations of the young people are very serious because they now make up this generation. What do we do to empower them? Whether it's skills training, whether it's education, whether it's job opportunities, they are our future. And I believe 70% of what we do must be able to attract them to work with us to create the Liberia that they want to see. As we put out these programs, you must have young people that are willing to accept it, willing to go to other parts of the country that might not be Monrovia, because the further you go away from the capital city, the more difficult it is to live.
Well, you are an influential woman, strong one for that matter. What are you bringing on board your government, particularly as far as women are concerned? What form of affirmative action are you going to propose, or do you have in mind to ensure that we have more women in the governance space?
Well, we had tried in 2017 when we went through the electoral process to get more women elected. We had a huge challenge because some of those who stepped on the stage weren't quite ready. The men prepare 4 or 5 years ahead of time. They save their money, they begin to buy their t-shirts, they get their slogans ready so that by the time the next says ready, set, go, they're ready to move. Women usually don't even join political parties. And so we had a lot of women who were independent candidates. But in an election where you have major political parties vying for the presidency, people will vote along party lines. And so I think we need to reiterate the fact that if you want to be in politics 6 years from now, go and join a political party. And I'm not talking about the women's wing. No. Because men think, oh, we have the women's wing in the political party and that's the space for women. No, it is not. It is a token position. If you're not in a position of an administrator at the party level, then you're relegated to just a one vote, because the chair lady of the women's wing is just one vote. Yeah. You will sit around a table where there will be 20 men and maybe one woman. We must vie for those positions as vice chairpersons of the parties or chairpersons of those parties, so that we're in a position to utilize our votes collectively to change the way the parties operate. They've normally operated as a boys' club. The men get together and they make those decisions. And so I believe it is incumbent upon me and many other women who have been dealing with this issue to begin to find a way to get women in the politics of our day, and that is only done properly through the political parties. Another way is to look at how we can encourage women to step on the stage. A lot of women are afraid. And I can tell you 2017 was a very critical elections. And I was attacked every single day. I mean, you would be surprised at some of the things people threw at me. And most women see it and say, hey, I'm not cut off for that. But if we continue to stay away, then the things that affect us, the things that are important to us and our children are left under the table. Because you have the men who gather and make their decisions based on who they are. You can't fault them for it, but the position has been now over the last maybe 10 years that women have a little bit access. Are we utilizing it? Are we ensuring that the strong women get to that table? Sometimes you'll find out that you're the only person at that table. And it makes it difficult, so that when you're discussing the important issues, first thing they'll say, okay, where are the women? If this is what you guys are saying, why aren't some of them at this table? So it takes a whole process of reforming our minds, encouraging our women that we too must be a part of the decisions that affect our very lives. If a policy for free education comes on board, how does it affect the girls that are in the Leeward counties or in the villages? How do we now put in place plans and programs to ensure that our young women are included in the scholarship opportunities that are available? If you're not at that table, by the time you hear what's going on, you're at the tail end, and women are even far more discriminated against and marginalized.
Excellency, what's the plan for keeping girls in school? Because we know that they go to school, but as they progress on the ladder, sometimes they fall out. What's your plan?
In our country, between kindergarten and 6th grade, you'll find out that there will be more girls than boys. By the time you get to the 7th and the 8th grade, you realize that the girls start to fall off. Early sexual activities, teenage pregnancy, early marriages, all of those things are real impediments to keeping girls in school. And what we've been trying to do in Liberia is to begin to talk about it. There are laws now that prohibit early marriages, but those are urban laws. You realize that when you go into the rural villages, people are still giving their 13 and 14-year-old daughters into marriage. I believe we must go the extra step, and those who are involved in it must be prosecuted, because it is now against our laws to give your daughter before 18 into marriage. And maybe the punishment part of the laws will help people to start to rethink, okay, if I do this, I'll probably end up in jail, so I'm not going to give my daughter up. And it's a process, because, you know, social changes usually take a long time. But there must be a carrot and a stick approach, so that people who actually breach these laws are punished in a way to send the message clearly. We must ensure that our daughters are provided adequate education to know that they can be whatever they want to be. And if you don't want to be a housewife or a teacher, because those are some of the roles that are ascribed, you know, normally. You tell your daughter, go and become a teacher, go and become a nurse. What if she wants to be a medical doctor or a neurosurgeon? We must encourage them by inspiring them. We also need to get into place mentorship, which African women outside of your family setting don't do. It's easier to mentor your nieces and mentor your cousins that are younger than you, because families always get together. Sometimes it's important to go outside. What you will find is that those political families have stronger daughters who is easy to get into a situation and say, well, I want to be a politician, or I want to be this. But those families that are not normally political families, their daughters are far behind. How do we bridge the gap so that the message that we're sending and the information we're providing goes across the board, so that regardless of who you are and where you live and where your parents come from, that girl can be what she wants to be.
How do you expect your relationship with the US in particular and the UK to be, knowing that they're dealing with Liberia and Liberia's vice president?
It's a very challenging position, because I know how they feel, looking at the history of Liberia over the past 30 years. You know, America has put in a lot in terms of helping to develop our country. And between 1980 and 2003, a lot of changes took place. Presidents were killed, others were arrested and sent to jail. And America is always at the front burner when it comes to Liberia's activities, democracy, development. And so they've put in so much, it doesn't seem off when they're interested in how the country is going and what the trajectory would be. But sadly, I'm looked at as, you know, former wife of President Taylor, that should not be given such an opportunity. And so the onus is on me as an individual. How do I operate? What do I do? How do I engage the international community so that they can get to know that I have no other agenda but the agenda of the people of Liberia? There is no hidden agenda. There is no agenda to bring former President Taylor back. I don't know how he was arrested and what the circumstances were, and I have no such ability. However, people use it as an opportunity to stand off and say, let's watch and see what she's going to do. And so I believe that priority number one for me as a vice president of Liberia is to work for the people of Liberia. But priority number two is to find a way to make more friends in the international community from both of those countries so that they'll get to know the Jewel Howard Taylor that I really am, and that they'll get to trust the fact that I have no hidden agenda.
Your Excellency, Shiros, why are you so passionate about Shiros?
There are many organizations across Africa dealing with different issues. Shiros highlights women heroes of Africa. There's a difference between the way men think and how they grow and how they learn, and how women grow and how they learn. If you think back to your childhood, you realize that growing up at your mother's knees, you learn by seeing her do. A boy will go to a class or to a place, and just by here, he can make his own way because they're grown like that. But a girl learns by doing. I always say, when your mother tells you and you're baking and she tells you, put a pinch of salt. What does a pinch of salt mean? You could actually pick up a large amount, or you could actually pick up a pinch. How do you learn when she says a pinch of salt? You do it over and over. If the bread is salted, then she said, well, your pinch of salt was not a pinch of salt, it was too much. After a while, by the time you grow up and you're baking, and you can just pick up a pinch of salt, and it's just right, without any measurements. So women learn by seeing others do what they do. Shiros has come up with a very unique idea. Where are the female heroes of Africa? Who are they? What did they contribute? I believe in Liberia and in maybe schools here in Accra, Ghana, if you visit and you look at the history books, we're learning more about the Western world. We're learning about, those who stood the test of time, mostly men. But if you look at most of our books across Africa, you will find stories about strong men. Kwame Nkrumah, and the African leaders of our time, Nelson Mandela's, and those strong people. Where are the women? What's the history that we have that gives our young generation a chance to see and to grow and to aspire and to achieve and to give back? Because that is the circle that we all must go through. We can only do so by seeing others. And so in spite of everything that's going on the African continent, and there are a lot of things going on, Shiros has taken on a small responsibility to show that indeed it can be done. There's this person in Egypt. There's another one in South Africa. There's someone in Nigeria. There's another one in Liberia. The Joyce Bandas of our time, and the Ellen Johnson Sirleafs. We're not perfect. We have our challenges, but the fact is, when girls see other women succeed, it builds something in them. It builds character, it builds capacity, and they can get up one morning and say, but of course I can be that person. And Shiros is that example. I believe as we continue to do what we do, we're looking now at mentoring other young girls across Africa. We're looking at telling the stories of our female heroes, so that our children's children can be inspired to be that inner person that they've all dreamed of. Some of them are afraid. How can I do this? Why should I? It is only the stories of our female heroes across Africa that will set the pace, so that maybe 5 generations from now, you'll still be able to hear about a Jewel Howard Taylor. What did she do? How did she become, what she became? How did Ellen Sirleaf and Joyce Majuros and all of the other female women, the other women of Africa that have achieved so much, achieve those feats? Because our daughters need them. And so Shiros is a one-in-a-lifetime organization, because it's setting the pace and telling the stories and reminding us of what we can be as women.
That was an interesting interview. Very interesting perspectives shared by Madame Jewel Taylor, who's the Vice President of Liberia. We do congratulate her on her new position, and we wish her all the very best. We'll be right back after this break.
So, of course, it's a beautiful Saturday, and some of you will be heading to the poolside, but it's also Easter, and of course, people will be trooping to the beaches. And we know around this time that people who get drowned and people who don't know how to manage themselves around a pool or the beach side. And so we're going to give you some quick tips on how to keep safe and make sure you return home safely after you've enjoyed yourself at the beach side or the pool side.
And yes, we've had a very exciting show. It's always exciting being here on Captured by Women. We've discussed the issue of communication and how powerful communication is and how it can influence people either negatively or positively. But we've encouraged that we pay attention to how we use the platforms that we're giving to positively impact lives, because people really remember us because of what we say and how we say it. But we've also discussed the issue of Easter and the spirit of Easter, and recommended, of course, that we reflect on the actual essence of what Easter represents, and that's the death and the resurrection of Jesus. Nana.
Yep, and we also had an exclusive with the Vice President of Liberia, who rose from being the first lady, ex-first lady, to this, point. And we're grateful and very happy to have a woman playing such an important role in Liberia. And of course, we also spoke about the tips of keeping safe at the beach and the poolside, because we don't want you to drown. We want to see you when we air the next episode of Captured by Women. When we come your same time, next week we'll be on your screens. We want you to be able to see us, not from the poolside.
And we're off to Jekiti.
Yep, the bus is waiting for us. We have to run to Jekiti. We'll see you there. Join us. Please join us. Of course, next week we'll be back. Rosamond will be back from the Easter break, and we'll all be here to have another episode of Captured by Women. Happy Easter! No Easter bunnies.